Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this roundtable session looking at the circularity of energy. It's a pleasure to welcome you all here, and hopefully we're going to have a very nice panel discussion. If people have questions during the discussion, please put them in the chat, and we will get to the Q&A. We'll have just a few minutes to run through each of our panel members and to get some opening comments from them. And then we hope to sort of respond to any comments that you put in the chat. My name is Sean Kelly. I work for the Nanotechnology Industries Association. So we're a membership association made up of nanotechnology companies looking at new materials and how we can innovate with them. So first of all, just to say a few words of introduction to the topic. Energy is obviously central and key to our lives and the way we live. And obviously it's important that we look at how we produce energy, how we use energy, and indeed how we recover energy when we're thinking about the way we live and the space we live in. In the European Union, the ambition is to be the first climate neutral continent and do that by 2050. So that's an incredible challenge, and we're going to have to adapt a lot of new technology to reach there. Currently, buildings are responsible for about a third of the energy emissions within the European Union, but only 1% of those buildings are undergoing energy efficient renovation every year. 75% of buildings in the European Union aren't energy efficient. So we have to address those sorts of issues. And mainly, we're also going to have to look at how we can make sure that when we're addressing these issues, we're not just thinking about the technology itself that we'll be using, but also how that technology will intersect with our lives and how we can drive up citizens' acceptance of technology, which is going to have a lower environmental impact. So starting at the sort of the major level and thinking of the sort of city level, I'll come first to our first panel member, who's Paolo Rodriguez, who's the Chief Environmental Resources Officer for Matush metropolitan area. And I'd just like you to sort of talk a little bit about how you're actually using the waste in the city to sort of recover some of the energy.
Okay, thank you, Sean, and good afternoon to everybody. So, my name is Paul Rodrigues. I'm head of the environmental division and in Matosinhos, and I'm responsible for one of the issues of the topics of my management is the waste management. So, concerning Matosinhos, we produce about 90,000 tons of municipal waste per year. It's a lot. We have 175,000, around 175,000 citizens. So, and it's a lot of waste. Every year, it's a lot of waste. And in order to understand a little bit what is the waste management in Matosinhos and also in the metropolitan area, Portugal is divided by 23 systems, metropolitan systems, responsible for the waste management. In Porto metropolitan area, the company responsible is Lipor, that has an integrated waste management system, which with recycling, sorting centers, composting plants, and also a waste-to-energy plant. And this waste-to-energy plant it produces about 170 gigawatts per year with the burning of the municipal waste, and also avoiding that this waste goes directly to landfill. Almost 60% of the waste, all the waste produced in Portugal goes to landfill. In Porto metropolitan area, in Lisbon metropolitan area, and also in Madeira, there's 3 waste-to-energy plants, and it allows the system to produce energy, green energy. So this is very important because not only the municipalities such as Matosinhos, but also like the other 7 other municipalities that belong to the report company, they are not addressing any kind of waste to landfill, and instead they are sending to a waste-to-energy plant, which allow us to produce green energy. So this is very important. So you can know the energy produced is equivalent to the energy consumed by a municipality as Matosinhos, exactly, with 175,000 citizens. This is very important because we promote naturally the recycling and the sorting of the waste, but we have to know that there's also a residual fraction that or goes to landfill or goes to a waste to energy plant. So we can get more value from this residual waste if we send it instead of sending to landfill, we send it to waste to energy. Naturally, that we have to promote first the waste prevention, then the waste reuse, and then the waste recycle. But nevertheless, we know that there's some residual waste that we are sending to the waste to energy plant. This is one of the issues that the municipal is working on concerning the waste. Another issue that we are working with the energy efficiency is, for example, that we are talking about the public lighting. I think I can now go to this issue, Sean. Yes. So concerning the public lighting, one of the key issues that we are, I would say it's a change of perspective of strategy. We are no longer buying lamps or reorganizing the public lighting, we are now going for a public lighting service. Instead of buying products, we are going to buy service. This is very important because we are not just buying the lamps, you are now buying a service of efficiency, of hours of lighting, if I can say that, and it's very important. But since as around I would say 21,000 public lights, and we are changing now about 20,000 and a half for LED lighting, which is very important, and it represents a lot of efficiency. We are going to, instead of having I would say a more whole type of management, we are going to have all telemetry and all the devices for a smart city that allow us a very upgrade on efficiency, but on a level of service and not a product, which I think it's more aligned with the principles of a more circular economy and instead of buying products, buying service, and allowing that our providers or companies that work with municipality also have to work with the municipality to improve efficiency. So I think this is the two main points. Another issue that would be interesting to debate further and not it's that we are also getting energy from our waste water plants because we are with sludge and so on. We are trying to capture some pain, some biogas, and also to work on this level in order to see where we can get also some efficiency or we can produce some energy. So those are the three topics that I would like to reinforce at the moment.
Thank you ever so much for that. That's a very good, some very interesting insights there. I'd just like to move on quickly, if I can, to Joan Nunes from Cicolab. And I noticed that the sort of strapline of your organisation is circular economy. It's not impossible, but obviously, as we've just heard, it does involve interacting with many different people and bringing all of those different disparate aspects sort of together to come up with some of the solutions. And so, just like if you could just sort of introduce us a little bit to the Secolab concept and the sort of work that you're doing amongst your partners to enable some of these interlinks to sort of happen.
Yeah, thank you, Sean, for the introduction. Good afternoon for all. Thank you for the invitation to present today about the work of Cicolab. And also we have my colleague, George Paiva, that will complete my introduction about Cicolab. Cicolab is a collaborative laboratory towards a circular economy. we create a bridge between the academy and the companies. We are working in 7 main areas: the forest, agro-food, urban waste, water, construction, manufacture, and service. That I told Paulo Rodrigues about the service and the importance of the service for the context of the urban metabolism, about the circularity in urban metabolism. In fact, it's very important to develop solutions and skills about the service. I will talk a little about the construction sector and why we choose the construction sector, but Jorge Paiva will talk a little about the other areas that you are working this moment. So, construction sector represent 37% about the waste generate in the European countries. In other end, is responsible for the consumption of more or less 30% of the energy. So is the one of the most important sector in context of the circular economy, and how it's possible to interview and design a different perspectives, a different challenge in construction sector. So we can divide in 3 points about the intervention in the construction sector. First point is in the beginning of the phase is about the design and the project of the buildings. So it's very important the integration, the designers and the architects in this process, because when we choose the materials, when you choose the type of construction, we will have impact in the circularity of the construction, in the efficiency of the building, and also in the energy used in the construction phase of the building. So the second point is in context of the use of the building. So how it's possible use the building in context of the energy, not only the efficient energy in the building, but in the symbiosis between the building, the energy communities in the buildings. So is a different perspective that it's possible to increase the circularity in context of the energy flow, because the building sector have 2 same dimensions in the same time: the mass flow that generates waste and is the responsible for the consumption of natural resource, and also the energy flow present in the construction sector about in the buildings. So in the third point, the final of the use of the buildings. So it is the moment where it generates the waste from the demolition and the demolition of the building, and also the construction in the recovery the buildings, used buildings when you want to recover it. So in this moment, we also the generation of the waste, but the capacity for the integration of the principles of the energy flow, the principles of the efficient of energy. So I would like to introduce, and in this moment, George can talk a little better about the other 1 or 2 areas in context of the Secolab with importance for energy and circularity. Thank you so much, and all of us.
And so we move neatly on to George, who'll continue. And you're mute, George, by the way.
Well, sometimes we think that we are in real mode, but we have all these internet things that blocks our thoughts. So thanks for the invitation. So João talk a little bit about what we are doing in construction. There are 2 other areas that could be interesting for this discussion. One could be the urban residues, and Paulo Rodrigues already talked about what the Matosinhos and the Porto region is doing, and also the water that also Paulo talked. So in these two fields, we know that we are able to reduce energy in two ways. One is for the reduction of the residues itself, and the other one is to the reuse, or for example, if we're not able to reuse, remanufacture, and so on, using all these R from circular economy, we can at the end use the energy that that materials contain. And the same for water. So water is also essential for our lives, is the beauty. If we want to make a connection with this new Bauhaus, so the beauty of the things, and it is the link of all things. And at the end, we know that we are also using this water, so we are able to make the use more efficient in the cities, also protect our cities for extreme events associated to water, and not only, for example, the question of some droughts, but also the excess of water. And you know that regularly you have these problems. But at the end, also to think how we can maintain water in our system and reuse this water. And by the end, if nothing is more available from this water, when you treat, to use this sludge in different options to recover nutrients, but also to recover energy. So could be one possibility. And so for now, I think it's the two main issues that I would like to add to the talk of João. Thank you.
Thank you, George. And then coming then from the sort of macro big area of thinking about things at a city scale or at a building scale, we must also think about the technology that we're going to be developing at the smaller scale as well. So thinking about, for example, how we can use some of the knowledge that we have to manufacture new technology that's going to allow us to generate energy more efficiently. But also we have to think about when we're making these new products, that we're not also impacting the climate in their manufacture. So I'd just like to move on to Pedro, and ask you if you could tell us a little bit about some of the work you've been doing on reducing the materials being used in manufacture of solar cells.
Sure. Thank you, Shen, for the introduction and all the speakers right now. And I think all these things are extremely well connected. And we researchers, I think we have awakened a bit earlier to these problems a bit sooner than everyone else, in the sense that in most of our projects, we already try to include life cycle assessments, try to understand when we develop technology, the influence that the technology has from the cradle into the grave. I mean, and these are concerns that we have been adding in most of our projects, not only trying to develop technology that works the best, but how it can be recycled, how it can take the most out of the resources. As you mentioned, as been mentioning here, one of the things that is most important is buildings that can generate most of the energy that they use, if not generate more energy than they use for, so that we can have urban communities that can be independent and do not harm the environment. And for this one of the technologies that is most essential is photovoltaic, so the capability to create electricity out of sunlight. So what happens with that technology is that it's mostly concentrated in parts of the world, in Asian countries, and that alone creates a lot of stress, as we've seen with the latest pandemic, in terms of shipping all these things across the world. And one of the projects that we just finished is about reducing the amount of critical raw materials that go into these solar modules. So the project that we had, we are using 400 times less material than the common panels. And while at the same time, we were trying to make them beautiful, in the sense that nowadays when we install a panel, they have this kind of blue shining look. And we managed to do a panel that is completely black. So aesthetically, I think this is quite pleasant. You see architects using more and more black facades this is something that getting 10, 20 years ago, it would have been unthinkable to have a building with a dark color. Nowadays, you start to see it quite commonly. So in that project, we developed this technology that we have these black panels using 4 times less material, but you need to put a bit of nanotechnology into it. So even though our life cycle assessment demonstrated that we were getting much less influence in the environment, in health, in amount of energy that it takes, the modules, they would be more expensive to manufacture. Even though they were using 400 times less critical raw materials, they were producing more energy. Their energy payback was much lower. So they were producing energy, the amount of energy that they needed in order to make another module was half the time compared with the traditional photovoltaic technology. In spite of that, what happened was that because we didn't demonstrate upscaling that could effectively reduce the cost, the companies were really placed that into delay, waiting that the technology the manufacturing technology would catch up. So even though in terms of big projects, we already have the concerns that are being spoken here about how you can create the energy communities of the future by having local generation that is much more sustainable and much more effective than the ones that you have now. How can you have these kind of energy generation technologies that are more beautiful and more aesthetically pleasant to be integrated? And now you can save resources and have a lower environmental footprint. There's still the question that in the end we're still dominated by economics, and that's a concern that we should also put in the umbrella of these discussions, because it's not only about the technology, it's not only about the direct decisions or what the people want. There's a layer of economics around here.
Okay, thank you ever so much for that, Pedro. We've started to get some questions in from the audience, which is great. So please do keep the questions going, and we'll start looking at some of those questions now. So one of the first questions that has come through says, buildings still have a heavy carbon footprint. Being that the construction sector is quite a traditional one, how can we achieve the kind of innovation and creativity that circularity needs in this field? And Pedro, just continuing on from some of what you say, it sort of may be interesting to think about how are you working with the companies on the solar cells to try and get that kind of change that's needed?
Sure. So what I think that building companies have started to realize that they have to bet more on retrofitting. So we have this building here. We don't need to demolish the building and build a new one to be energy efficient. You can go there and apply technologies that exist today to make them more energy efficient. So in terms of solar technology, there is another technology that needs to work together, which is batteries. So you need to have batteries and solar in order for the buildings to start to be capable of generating their own energy, but then also that they can storage that to use overnight, for instance. And to that, we need to have technologies that architects accept, because that's the most important thing, that the users find pleasant and easy to work with. So, and we start to have a triangle of performance, acceptance, and then technical details in terms of building codes, architecture, engineering, that there's no compromise in any of these things. So I think that if those technologies are available, the building developers and the owners, they will start to be more and more conscious that there are solutions. But we still need to continue to develop other kind of technologies, like insulation that can be applied to existing buildings. All kind of technologies are still missing, and the solar is something that is it's being well developed, but it still needs also a bit more. So, and of course, again, and maybe I'll push a bit on this, but price is also a question. If it is cheaper just to demolish a building and do it from the scale 0 than to retrofit it, a developer will have no no second thoughts, right? They'll just do it. So we need also a layer of, and I think it's good, these kind of events where we have like the CTL people here and the associations all together. There are layers that we can add into building codes, for instance, that we can force technology developments through, like green procurement and research projects that already involve the building constructors, so that everything is a kind of a loop. So circularity is not only on the way you use the energy of the materials, but it's also on the way you do things. So yeah, these kind of events are really important.
And following on neatly from that, another question from the audience. The move towards a circular economy seems to require deep changes in consumer behaviour, and it'd be interesting from the Secolab perspective, as you're bringing together lots of different people and all the sorts of solution providers. How do you also bring in the consumer into that work and make sure that the consumer behaviour can change as well as the technology? And if I could ask Joanne Nunes to maybe have a comment on that.
Yeah, I have some comments. Like Pedro told, I'm completely agree. The consumers, the users, it's very important, because the decision of the market is in the consumers. If the consumers don't want some materials, you don't need the production of these materials. So the one of the key option is the communication, the training, and the interaction with the consumers and users of this context. Because if you can change the mind of the consumers, it's possible to change the metabolism of the production of the materials and the implementation of the solutions. So we need the focus, of course, in consumers. We have in this moment, George can talk a little about this. We have a special work group in context of the market, consumers, work in this moment. We integrate in this multidisciplinary work group skills and competence from law, for market, for sociology, for economics. So we are design some actions and some information to support the decision of the consumers and users of the materials. So George, talk a little about the work group in this context. Thanks. You are mute.
I'm not familiar with this, so familiar with these technologies. Always I forgot. And so indeed, we're bringing different person from is in a multidisciplinary group from lawyers, from economics, marketing, and so on. So we are, as João told, trying to think about how we can communicate, how we can drive this changing, at least starting in Portugal, to this circularity. I think one of the big problems of construction sector, for example, is that the life cycle is too extended, sometimes bigger than us, so we forgot the end of life. And in this question of circularity, we need to improve our knowledge and our conscience on this, that indeed, when we build something, we are extracting materials, they have a time of life. At the end, could be 50 years, 100 years, we will modify this. They go to a end of life. So I think in this thing, if we need also to try to communicate that indeed will not, the materials and the energy will not end, but should be recirculated. So what we are also thinking is to try to communicate this. So thinking how we can construct and how we can demolish. And for example, this could be very important because we hope to have this wave of renovation in buildings. So we'll generate a lot of materials. But indeed, we need to think not these materials like a waste, but a new material that you can reuse. So maybe, and in that process could be very interesting to think about material passports, or even the building information modeling, because that could help to reuse these materials. So and we try in our group and with Socolab also to think on this perspective, in a large perspective of life cycle and cradle to cradle, and not cradle to the grave. So and we try to implement this.
Yeah,
I don't know, João, if you want to complement.
If I just stop you there, because I just wanted to bring in Paolo on this and sort of say, from a local government perspective, what sort of role has the local government play in all this?
Sean,
Also producing the sort of framework that allows all this to happen.
Thank you, Sean. All the inputs of my colleagues are very important. We have to make a complete shift on the way we think about construction and demolition. Let me just say that deconstruction is so much important, and as the construction, selective deconstruction, where we can recover the materials. I can talk to you about a European project financed by the Horizon 2020, which goes exactly in the direction that my colleague said, providing, the project is called Building as a Material Bank, and the aim is to provide a passport for the materials that can reintroduce. But one question that we have to think is like construction also as a commodity sector that provides air, water, energy, because we don't need to buy the device of air conditioner. We need the hot air or the cold air. And one of the things that is going to shift this way we think construction is also to think as the construction and demolition sector as a commodity sector, that instead of providing devices for the new buildings, we are going to have a service of providing lighting, of providing water, of providing energy. And this is very, very important, because companies that provide this service, they're the ones who are going to improve effectiveness and so on. I can give you an example. Rolls-Royce, for example, is not more providing, I would say, cars or vehicles, is providing hours of traveling. Another example is Philips, that is no longer selling lamps, but is selling hours of lighting. And the way we think that the construction demolition sector goes is also to be that we are going to have a commodity sector, where we, instead of buying devices, we are going buying service. Another thing is, as my colleague said, is to have the full cycle vision of the construction and deconstruction sector, because we need to think when we construct that hopefully after long years we'll have to demolish, and we need to go to the selective demolish of the building, instead of only demolish and send it to landfill. The key issue is that the quality of the material. We try in the metropolitan area to recover the construction demolition waste, and that's a key issue in order to have the full cycle.
If I can just pause you there then, because that brings us neatly onto another question that someone in the audience has asked, is, do you believe that a company not aligned with the circularity principles will be able to survive? And I'll come first to João Nunes to address that. So will a company that is not aligned to circularity, will it have a future?
Yes, it's a very good question about if we have a future in context of the circularity implementation. I think we can talk a little about, is the same vision that Pedro told. We need the consequence. If you don't have the consequence, it's not possible to shift the people for the consumption and choice the circularity in the, and for the consequence you need to pay in context of our activity in this moment. We are designing some teasers and some incentives for the transition for circularity. So it's possible in the future, and is the draw for the future is the circularity. So, but we need the consequence to between the people that choose circularity and the people that choose circularity. So, if you don't have the consequence of this, it's very complicated to transition for circular economy. So I think it's possible. It's not impossible. The future having the future more efficient in the use of the circularity of the mass flow and energy flow, but we needed to construction some teasers, the teasers about the incentives, the ticks, so to transition for other choice in this moment. So I think it's very important is determines the consequence of the choice and the consumers for the future of the circularity.
Okay, and then moving just quickly on to Pedro. Along those similar lines, what role should the research base be playing in helping those companies ensure that they're able to develop the right technologies and to move to the sort of along the lines of the circularity principles in their work?
I think one solution is projects researchers have to think bigger. So and also in a circular in a way from an idea into that. This requires also changing a bit the way research is done. And for this, something that is starting to appear is living demonstrators, living laboratories, where not only the researchers go and test their things, but you can actually have the general audience going and seeing how the things are applied, and you involve the companies, and the companies also do these installations and see how things are going. So, for instance, I can briefly talk about the project that we have. It's a national project on energy storage called Batteries 2030, where we have been retrofitting, or we will retrofitting a building in downtown Braga with the latest technologies that are being developed at different technology readiness levels. So some of them will be commercial in a couple of years. Some we only hope them to be commercial in 10 15 years. But they're already being installed, and we will be having the opportunity. And here I include as researchers, as the general public, and also the companies, to really see how the technologies are being incorporated, how they will be developing throughout the time, and what their performance will be. So again, this goes back a bit to the questions that are being addressed, which is we have to convince the people, but we also need to put the companies on there. And this implies a support from the law, the legislators, the people who apply the legislation, but also the technology developers.
And what I think will probably end up being near enough one of our final sort of questions from the audience, because it is a very big question. The vast majority of people will be living in cities in the future. How can cities address the increasing challenges of having more and more people in less and less space while complying with the tight rules and the schedules defined to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050? So I'll turn first to George and ask him, from the Secolab perspective, how can we make sure that we're building better cities and making sure that we can achieve those the ambitions of carbon neutrality by 2050 whilst trying to fit in the needs of the people? And just remind you that you are still on mute.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting question indeed, and it's the big question. And I think one of the drivers of circularity, if we think that the big majority of people will be in huge cities that are not prepared now to cope with all the problems associated from food, from energy, from construction, from well-being. So I think circularity, if we are able to regenerate inside these big cities the materials, the water, the air that we need, and circularity could have circular economy can have this key of regeneration. So I think the cities should be able to regenerate themselves. And in that case, I think we'll have less consumption of external energy, or input of materials, and so on. So I think we, for example, as Matosinhos is doing, trying to regenerate the own energy. So at least the region of Porto are able to sustain Matosinhos. Okay, it's not a huge city, but if we consider all the water that you can treat and regenerate, all the energy that's in the urban ecosystem that you can recuperate also or regenerate, could be very interesting. So I think we should try to use this regeneration, thinking in cities as a regenerator of energy and materials, and not just using materials and energy.
And Paolo, from a more local government perspective, how will it be possible for a metropolitan area, an urban area, to be able to generate the energy it needs, and also make sure that energy is being reused and recycled within its own environs?
So that's the key question, and I think George, regeneration is a key aspect. Another key aspect is that cities or municipalities can't think on a boundary system. We must think on an integrated system with other municipalities, because we need to create symbiosis in order we cannot think that a municipality as Matosinhos will have all the solutions in our municipality. We need to think in an integrated way with Porto, with other municipalities, because people just don't live in Matosinhos. They work in Matosinhos, they live in Maia, they live in Porto. We don't have those boundaries on our daily life. So we think we have to work on a regenerated system, but an integrated metropolitan system, not only a municipal system. That's a key issue, because municipalities, they think for themselves. They don't think on an integrated way, and that's very important in order to think on a circular economy. Because another thing is that someone talked about public incentives. We need that. When we say that we need to shift the market, and the way to shift the market, we need taxes, we need incentives, we need to promote the shift. And it's not only with awareness. We need to push the market in that way, in order that companies see as an opportunity. And we need, you have taxation for CO2 emissions. We also need to go in that way in another environmental issues. It's very important to deal with that. Honestly, we need to face that. So, and another thing is that we need to shift the vision. You know, we have a lot of knowledge, universities, investigation centers, and so on, and we need that policies follow that knowledge. It's very important. We need to address that to politicians in order so they can see as a vision to the future. That's for me, it's the key aspects of that. Regenerate the future, also to provide knowledge to decision makers, and also have a legal framework in order to accomplish all the goals we talk about.
Thank you. And Pedro, from a research point of view, a new technology point of view, how can we make sure that all of the researchers and the scientists are rising to this challenge of being able to bring new technology to the market quickly to allow everyone to achieve those goals, whilst at the same time making sure that technology is not in itself causing a future potential problem?
I think it's a question of communication. As I hello.
Yeah, no, we can hear you, Pedro.
Okay, so if I heard the question correctly, it was about how we can make sure the technology and the researchers are aligned with all these needs that we are talking about, right?
Yes.
So I think again, I might have touched this briefly, and it's a question of communication, but also of trying to be. And this means the consumers, the companies, the manufacturers, the users, the most number of people within the value chain. Of course, the technology will have its limitations, and we will need to steer into a direction or another, depending on where the boundaries are.
Okay, thank you for that. And what will I think actually end up being the last question, because we have just about 8 or 9 minutes left. It'd be one of the members of the audience has asked, can we give some examples of circularity in action? So if I could turn to Joan Nunes to address that from Seco Lab to give sort of an overview of some examples of current circularity.
Okay. Yeah, in this moment we are design demonstration technology. It's very important, the demonstration technology for the implementation solutions in two contexts. One, in context of the second life of the water generating the urban system. It's very important how it's possible to reuse the water that are generating the wastewater treatments in the urban system for a second life, for industrial context. We are developing a technology and solutions for that. And also we are integrate we are research how it's possible to reuse the final of the equipments of the renewable energies. So we are focusing this moment. The renewable energy is very important for decrease the consumption of natural resource. We are in this moment to design a new solutions for use the renewable equipments in the final of the life. Two examples, but it's possible to talk about more examples. But other in context of not only we need the technology, we need only to design new policies and new ideas, taking account the other questions about the context of the urban ecosystems in 2050. I think it's also I'm completely agree with other colleagues, and we need it's in line with Paul. We need the backup ecosystems for the urban systems. So we need to integrate the bioeconomy with circular economy for the future of the circular economy in the urban system. So in fact, it's not possible to think only one municipality or city. We need to draw the future of the urban in a more high boundaries, not only in the same space. It's not possible. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult in the future to think in isolate mode. We need to construction policies for work with in design, in the cooperation, in the symbiosis between the municipalities and between the bioeconomy. We need the bioeconomy to this solution. So its other example is design policies, and for the future of the circularity is other example of that we are working circular.
Okay, and just to follow on from that, if I can just quickly ask George in 2 minutes to say, what do you think is the biggest barrier that we need to address today to make sure that we can achieve the circularity required by 2050? And you're on mute again.
Well, yeah, I think one of the big barriers, and Pedro already told, I think is the consumer behavior. I think it will be very difficult because the perception of the public, for example, for new materials derived from waste, is always associated non-quality. And I think we need to change this behavior. We need to provide this perception that the new materials, even they come from waste, or even they are manufactured and so on, they have quality and durability. And so this, I think, will be one of the biggest barriers. Another one is also in terms of the Caesars. I'm talking about government, local or national or European, that should indeed force. And now we have a big opportunity with this Green Deal because can drive also this move to circularity. We need to take the chance to go there at the end in 30 years, because it's small time indeed. If we consider we don't have so many time to achieve that. And I think if we are able to develop new technologies, and a lot of technologies I think are there, they are not yet commercial available, and we need to change this paradigm. But I think is behavior, technology, and also wish from who is governing us. And if we have these three main things, I think we can go fast and in a robust way to this circularity, to this economy. I don't know, João, if you have some words to.
Excellent. So I think we've near enough reached the end of our time. And I think, if anything, George, you provided us with an excellent conclusion there. And I think the conclusion of the session is that we are faced with what is a very large challenge. It's a challenge that can be addressed. There isn't a single answer. It's not a technology answer, certainly by itself. Obviously, it involves people. And I think that ties in very neatly with the BAUHAUS initiative, that we're looking at something that is not just one solution, it's multiple solutions driven by multiple people across multiple countries in multiple areas, and a shared vision, I think, indeed, to make sure that we can share the knowledge and the learning across the whole of the EU. And I'd just like to, in conclusion, thank the panel members who have provided some excellent insights and some great responses to the questions. And I'd like to finally thank the audience who have sat and listened to us and have asked some really interesting, perceptive questions. And I believe that we will all now go back into the main session and to listen to the conclusion. So thank you ever so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you.